Hello and welcome back to the Life and Risk podcast. This week we're going to be covering some news that's come out regarding older watches, vintage watches, auction world, as well as some of the upcoming events that are taking place. Obviously going into April, this is a very big time for the watch industry, and so we'll spend a little bit of time talking about that. And then I think what we'll do is we'll end with talking about Swiss watch exports and kind of the general sentiment of a collector. And I think I'll share just some personal thoughts for myself when it comes to, the journey of a watch collector and how maybe falling out of love with watches can happen and, of course, can be a good thing. So I'll start off just with a reminder, if you do not know, on Tuesday when this podcast comes out on April 1st, the Swiss watch or watch industry comes together in the Expo in Geneva for the 2025 edition of Watches and Wonders. This is essentially a week packed full of big announcements from the various watch brands that are manufacturing watches, and it's a good opportunity for us as enthusiasts and collectors to see what watches these brands are producing and will be focused on for the next 12 months. Obviously, this is fairly focused on the press. There's a lot of watch media that attends these events and are able to sort of showcase the watches that these brands are coming out with. Nevertheless, if you follow any sort of watch channel or watch outlet on any social media, you're going to see coverage of Watches and Wonders, which is very exciting. I'm particularly excited to see watches from Vacheron Constantin, who is celebrating their 270th anniversary. But likewise, there are so many different brands that are at these events, and it's quite exciting. Watches and Wonders has sort of replaced, if you have been in watches for quite a long time, Basel World, which was sort of this world exhibition fair that took place in Basel, Switzerland, and was a real staple in the calendar. Obviously, Watches and Wonders has replaced that, and a lot of companies actually are doing their releases on their own. We have seen a couple of watches being released this year so far. If you want to see those, or you want to hear about those watches or see pictures and links to those pieces, I encourage you to check out the other episodes of the Life and the Risk podcast for you to peruse, see my thoughts, and then also go to the links where you can see these watches in action. So very exciting. The Watches and Wonders 2025 will run from April 1st to April 7th, and they will have the public showings on the 5th, 6th, and 7th. So if you are in the Geneva area or plan on visiting, those are the days for you to get tickets. I think tickets go very, very quickly, so I encourage you to do so up front. As I mentioned, I'm very excited about Vacheron Constantin, the watches that they're going to be releasing as they are celebrating their 270th anniversary. And the reason why is I think Vacheron Constantin has always been a brand that I have been in love with. I really enjoy a lot of their models, the history of the brand, and what they stand for. If you don't know, their philosophy since 1819 is quoted as "do better if possible, and that is always possible." And I really do think that they live by that sort of mantra. Right now they have an exhibition that's happening in Abu Dhabi, where they are showcasing the incredible journey that their brand has been on, called The Quest, 270 years of seeking excellence. And this is running from February 21st all the way to April 15th, and it basically showcases the history of the brand, the watches that they have produced, and is a really great opportunity to connect with the brand's history and see where they have come from, especially when you sort of look at their older pieces and then see what is new. They also did announce that on April 1st there's going to be a special announcement from the brand, which I'm very, very excited with, obviously coinciding with Watches and Wonders. You have timepieces from the past and present from the brand, which is really cool. And what's really great is it seems as if this is sort of the first stop for Vacheron Constantin. They did announce that there is going to be further locations that this exhibition is going to be showcased at. They haven't announced them just yet, but we'll be announcing them very, very soon. I really do hope that they come close to where I am located, because being so close with this brand, I think it's an excellent opportunity for me to experience them and sort of rejuvenate my love for Vacheron Constantin. So very exciting for that as well. Revolution Watch did a nice article on it. You can kind of see some of the exhibitions as well as sort of the editorial that they wrote about it. I encourage you to check it out. There'll be links in the show notes of this podcast to all of the topics that we discussed, so you can check it out there. So those two kind of cover the Watches and Wonders type of event. I wanted to move over to the vintage watch world for a moment and talk about the watch auction market. Very, very exciting. It was recently announced that that the Neil Armstrong Omega Speedmaster, the commemorative gold Omega Speedmaster, is coming up for auction and will be sold at RR Auctions Live in Cambridge, Massachusetts in the USA on April 17th. This is a really big event, as any type of memorabilia from the first man to walk on the face of the moon is a huge accomplishment. It underscores the importance of Omega, the Speedmaster, and Neil Armstrong to space exploration, and really comes with a whole host of so much meaning when you start thinking about it. Being the first man on the moon, being that this is an Omega Speedmaster, it's a really important piece to come at auction. Omega originally commemorated 28 18-karat gold Speedmasters with the reference number BA145.022. The first two were gifted to President Richard Nixon and Vice President Spiro T. Agnew. And then the 26 after that were presented to NASA astronauts at a gala dinner on November 25th in 1969 at Hotel Warwick in Houston. Neil Armstrong was given the watch with the number 17, and on the case back it reads, "To mark man's conquest of space with time, through time, on time," and Gemini 8 up to Apollo 11. More of these watches did eventually get to the general public, numbers 33 to 1000, and they came with a commemorative Apollo 11 case back that read "The first watch worn on the moon." This is a super exciting event that's going to be taking place next month. This is really a chance to own something that belonged to Neil Armstrong, an important figure in the history of the world, really, and it definitely comes with a lot of weight and significance of the watch, not just that of Omega's history. The watch is worn. It shows signs that it's been worn, which I think is really, really nice to see. It's not sort of this crisp, never worn piece, which, in my opinion, if I think about how I like collecting watches, I find that a lot more interesting than sort of the crispy, never worn pieces. It's just my personal taste. Obviously, I can see the value in watches that are in immaculate condition, that are like new and as if they just came out of the factory, especially from time periods before. But I like the fact that it's worn. It shows its character. Now, there's obviously a fine line between worn and beat up, and that's something that one has to consider. But I think this one is in fairly nice condition for the way that I would describe it. The watch has an estimate of $2 million US plus, and as I mentioned, will be sold on April 17th. I believe there's going to be a streaming of this event. I'm not positive, but if you are thinking about perhaps placing a bid, Omega has confirmed the watch's authenticity and its provenance with images of Armstrong actually wearing this watch over the years. So very exciting moment in in the collecting sphere. I also think there's an interesting tone here with this watch coming up for auction. This is a piece that has an incredible amount of provenance, yet, as we'll talk about in a second, Swiss watch exports and maybe the Swiss watch collecting sphere has sort of plateaued, and it will be interesting to see how this watch does in the current market environments. I will give a shout out to Mark over at Hodinkee, who in his article read maybe the possibility of Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos getting involved in the bidding of this watch is not out of the realm of possibility. And I don't think either of these individuals would announce that they have purchased this watch, but we'll have to see what kind of interest this does garner when this does come up for auction. So quite an exciting piece of news. Similar in the auction world, Sotheby's has announced that they are partnering with a new servicing platform called WatchCheck. This partnership is a pretty interesting bit of news. WatchCheck is a relatively new but intriguing company that launched in the last year, and what their partnership aims to provide is an easier, seamless servicing process. WatchCheck gives customers access to servicing partners in the United States that were previously largely accessible only to commercial clients. And so what one is able to do is basically go to WatchCheck, have their watch serviced by servicing partners that really most of the time will take really good care of the servicing. The project was founded by Lyndon Lazarus, who is the founder of vintage retailer Oliver & Clark, as well as Will Herring. When you go to the WatchCheck's website, you have to input a few bits of information about the make and model of your watch, upload some pictures of the watch, and describe the issue. And then after you provide your address, you'll get an estimate from the company, and you'll receive a shipping kit. And then inside that box is a pre-labeled external shipping box and a padded internal box with foam inserts that allow you to put your watch in there. So you can rest assured that the watch will be shipped and taken care of. What's really interesting is that the company named Stoll & Co., which is located in Dayton, Ohio, evaluates and services the watch. They're an authorized U.S. repair center for several brands, but their expertise goes way beyond the company's website. This is also the servicing, or I guess the authenticator of eBay authenticity program. So you can kind of understand sort of the full spectrum of where the servicing these watches go. It is quite interesting that Sotheby's is partnering with this company. I think Sotheby's has been kind of on the cutting edge over the last couple of years of the auction world, trying to be innovative, trying to be somewhat different than the other auction houses that we know and love. This is an opportunity for them to focus on the servicing of the watches, which a lot of the times is a criticism of the auction world, where individuals will purchase watches that and the watches are sold by the auction houses as is. And I've heard some horror stories of people receiving watches that they purchased from auction that were not running. And they were running prior to them actually bidding and winning the lots. So it's a cool step in the right direction to sort of address some of the criticism that the auction world has received over the last several years. And I'm not fully understanding sort of how this integrates with the auctions that Sotheby's will be hosting. I wonder if when they sell the watches at auction, that there will be some sort of coverage by WatchCheck to say, if the watch is not in running condition or you need a service, you could get some sort of you could utilize WatchCheck as the servicing agent for the watches that you purchase from Sotheby's. We'll have to see how this sort of pans out, and I think as the summer auction months are coming towards us here, we'll be able to understand the relationship between Sotheby's and WatchCheck in due time. So that's it for sort of the auction world. I'll move on to sort of my last and final topic that sort of segues into sort of a more personal discussion. And that is the fact that Swiss watch exports have really demonstrated kind of a losing streak over the last 12 months, but exports did dip in February. They fell 8.2% as the luxury watch sales face declining demand over the last, probably since August of last year. Swiss watch exports fell pretty sharply in February as shipments to key U.S. markets declined. The Swiss Federation of Swiss watch industry reports that the wholesale value of exports fell to 1.98 billion Swiss francs during the month, which is a decline of 8.2% compared to the same month last year. This steep drop in shipments of Swiss-made watches to foreign markets suggests sort of an industry-wide slowdown in demand and really raises fresh concerns about the resilience of U.S. consumers when it comes to Swiss watches. Exports declined in 2024 for the first time since 2020, following 3 years of record levels by value. If you look at the 12-month moving average, we saw a negative 12-month moving average starting in September 2024, and it has only gotten progressively worse over basically from there. What's interesting is if you look at the price ranges of the watches that saw this impact, essentially across all price categories from 250 to 500 Swiss francs, 500 to 3,000, and over 3,000 saw declines in both units and value. Interestingly, watches under 200 Swiss francs saw a decline in units, but their value saw a slight bit of growth. I think it's fair to say that there was, since 2020, which is the last quoted sort of year, things have boomed and sort of come down or there's been a lot of volatility. So we saw a ton of interest during COVID, and then we've seen slowly but surely sort of this decline in watch prices and watch interest as sort of the hype market has been squeezed out of this industry. I'll leave a link in the show notes for you to see the full report. But what I wanted to do is kind of segue into the topic that I wanted to talk about, and that is falling out of love with watches. It's an interesting thing when you talk to collectors, and I've had the opportunity to hear from a couple of individuals where this has happened, where, at the heart of their hearts, they absolutely love watches. They find them to be one of the joys in their life, whether it's collecting, learning about them, experiencing them, meeting the friends around them. And they will always be considered sort of watch people. But I think there is a moment where, unfortunately, you kind of get tired of it. You kind of get tired of it all. Whether that's the way that people consume watches or the way people showcase watches, it can get a lot and can get quite tiring. And I think falling out of love with watches is definitely something that can happen. Now, I don't know, I've tried to speculate on what exactly causes that to happen. I think every watch collector's journey sort of starts with a ton of enthusiasm and maybe a little bit too much, where they end up purchasing things that maybe they wouldn't really want, but really just want to be part of the experience. They want to experience the watches. I think at that point, then they hit a crossroads. Either they sort of go a little bit deeper, or they sort of plateau and then kind of don't really go too far, but I think that's another turning point where they say, okay, I'm going to go a little bit deeper, research a little bit, and sort of refine my tastes, and that's where they get to experience other brands. So I think typically you start off with the traditionals, the Omega, the Rolex, the Tudor, the Tag Heuer. I think at that point, then you kind of progress with your knowledge of watch collecting, and you start to experience brands like Jaeger-LeCoultre, Patek Philippe, Vacheron, Constantin, Audemars Piguet, and that gives you an appreciation for watchmaking as an art. And I think that's where you then evolve your collection. At that point, I think you then go one of two ways. I think either you go really, really deep into vintage watches because you've learned about the histories of these brands, perhaps the mechanics behind some of these watches, and you start learning about the histories of specific lines of watches, and maybe you go really, really deep vintage. I think another easy path for one to go is from there to start understanding independent watchmaking and understanding brands like MB&F, FP Journe, and it gives you an appreciation for those smaller collectors. And I think at that point, I think there is a pause that a lot of people do where it feels like they've kind of hit a wall with what they understand about watch collecting or what they know about watches. And they feel like there's not a whole lot more to explore there. And I think that's sort of the first time that one can fall out of love with watches. Now, I've been into watches for many, many years now, and I think I've gone through cycles, but I think that is the first opportunity where a watch collector sort of pauses and says, am I still into this? Am I still enjoying this? And I think that's a very fair time for someone to do it because they've experienced a ton of the watch industry, and I think so that kind of gives you a cycle. But I think if we think about the last 5 years, I think it's been kind of fatiguing for a lot of people, especially those who've been part of this hobby for such a long time, where it was a smaller sort of niche interest, and it's kind of become quite a large, or it's grown and become a sector of quite large interest. But we've seen, such incredible price volatility, and we've seen the changes in the watch groups or the people that we're kind of affiliating with in the industry, and we're seeing different types of different sort of content online about these watches in different forms that perhaps aren't sort of to our taste. And I think it can become, as I mentioned, very, very fatiguing, and it can become unenjoyable, and it's almost as if you don't want to associate with the thing that you love so much, because that what's next? What's the next thing that's going to happen? We're going to have a crazy price shock again, or huge announcements where watch brands change their core designs to be completely different than what we love. It's fatiguing, I think, is the best way to describe it, and it means you don't really want to associate with it. I think I want to make sure if that is you and you're listening to this, know that it will pass. There are waves of enthusiasm, and if you're anything like the collectors that I know, we go deep and we put everything that we have into this hobby, and sometimes it's okay to take a step back and take a moment just to breathe and sort of try and get back to the core of what you love about watches, which is personal. Everyone has their own thing that they love about watches, whether it's the stories that go with them, whether it's the brand histories, whether it's the mechanics behind the movements that were produced or the case designs that were made. And it's okay to take a moment to try and reinvigorate yourself with that key concept that you find so interesting about watches. And it's natural. I think a lot of collectors are feeling it, especially after the last 5 years, and don't be hard on yourself if you're feeling that, because I'll be honest, I'm feeling that a little bit, and what's really interesting, I think when I know that I'm kind of going through this, is when I don't really feel like even wearing a watch on my wrist. It's like I just don't want to associate with it. But then you kind of, what I've tried to do is sort of go back to the things that I really love. So I've, tried to go back to the Memo Sale. The Memo Sale is the first watch I ever fell in love with. It's a watch that I absolutely adore and will always adore. I've gone back to pocket watches because I find them very, very intricate and very, very beautiful in design. So go back to those original things that you loved, because it can oftentimes remind you of what's important to you in the watch industry, and hopefully get you back on track with the hobby that you love. Anyway, apologies to end this episode on such a somber or maybe serious note, but I wanted to sort of talk about it because I think it's an important topic to discuss with watch enthusiasts, because I don't want you to think that you're alone in the feelings that you have. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Life on the Wrist podcast. If you are new here, be sure to follow us. We release an episode basically every week if we have topics to discuss. So be sure to follow us and share this podcast with a friend who might be interested in watches. If you are new to Life on the Wrist, be sure to check out the description or the show notes of this podcast. You will be able to see links to our social medias, as well as our website and YouTube channel, so be sure to check those out as well. And if you wouldn't mind rating this podcast, it really does help me out. It gets this podcast to more individuals who are interested in watches, and gives me feedback on things that I can change and improve for the show. With that said, guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Life on the Wrist podcast, and we will catch you in the next one.